This session focuses on understanding the concepts and principles of agility and their implications in the world of HR. This session focuses on ensuring that the HR strategy aligns and supports business objectives. When this conversation has ended, we hope that you leave here with understanding the fundamentals of agility, understanding the implications of an agile workplace in HR strategies and processes, learn the skills that HR leaders and practitioners need to embrace in order to leverage in the advantages that agility brings, and understand how HR leaders and practitioners can enable effective HR strategy by utilizing the concepts and principles of agility. And this is not my area of expertise, so I am really excited to learn along with you from some of today's expert panelists. And I'm going to introduce them in order. And we're going to kind of go in that order when we do some Q&A from time to time, which is going to be the same order I see you on the screen, which is I think the same order you see. So we're going to start up top with Thomas, head down to OT, go down to Luke, and then if anybody else joins us, we'll add them to the mix after you guys. Does that sound great?
Excellent.
Perfect.
Tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm Thomas. I'm from the Lego Group. So I'm part of our global HR team in headquarters in Billund, and my responsibility is really to try to advance our processes, our platforms, and the direction for HR in general.
I love it. I'm so glad you're joining us. Thank you for being here. And you're with the Lego Group, like Lego toys.
Lego toys.
That's pretty cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
We're so glad you're here. I can't wait to hear about what you guys are doing. That sounds great. If anybody could streamline processes or use the agile methodologies, I imagine you guys have a ton of people who are very well versed in this in your organization.
I'd say we have a lot of creative people.
I love it. That's beautiful. So glad you're here joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm kicking it up to you.
Who goes next? Is it,
it's you. It's you.
There I go. How can I go after Thomas, right? I mean, Luke and I are bankers coming after Lego and all that play that comes with such a wonderful product. I'm a Chief Operating Officer and Chief Transformation Officer for ING, the global bank. And I want to really greet all those people out there, especially the folks from Europe and colleagues and friends who are joining us for the session. So hopefully we're going to have a really, really interactive talk. And over to Luke, I guess.
Thanks for the energy, Otti. And indeed, it's a bit of an overpresence for banking, I guess. So, Luke Sobieski, I work for a competitor of ING, ABN AMRO. And I'm responsible for what we do on employee experience and on future of work. And was part of leading the transition into a more agile HR workforce and putting the employee experience on the center stage.
I love it. Thank you for joining us. And hey, let's not give bankers a bad time, right? We're still cool in our own way. People in finance, like, it's still cool. Money is cool. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. Bethany, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you're here. So we're just doing a quick introduction and then we're going to jump into like, what even is this? Happy to hear from you. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So I am Bethany Turan. I'm the head of HR for Element Technologies, which is a manufacturer of refractory metals, really technical stuff. I've been in HR for 17 years and been in different retailers and distribution centers and been able to transform HR in multiple organizations. So have a lot to say about being able to adapt to whatever the need of the business is, and really excited to be able to talk to the team about what that looks like in reality.
I love it. I'm glad you're here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is going to be fun. So who wants to kick off what this even means? Because there are people joining us 100%. Oh, and by the way, we have somebody who's joining us from Nigeria. So like we're in far reaches of the world. I love this. What does like an agile methodology? Who wants to give the group a 101? Don't all raise your hand at once.
I'd like to point the finger to Archie, because he was so vocal just earlier.
Then I will take that challenge, Thomas, and kick us off. But please chip in. So I would say, when we talk about agility, what we're always saying, the key purpose of being agile is to get best at getting better. So the learning is really what it's all about. We are all facing environments that are getting ever more quickly changing and challenging in terms of competition, technology, regulation in the banking sector. So we need to create organizations that are able to learn at scale and harness the insights, the knowledge, the competencies from people at all levels of the organization and across boundaries, across functional boundaries, but also across geographical boundaries. So really bringing it all together to create services that are suitable for the customers out there. So that's how I would frame it to start with. But now I want to give the challenge back to Thomas, Luc, and Beth to build on this.
Well, thanks. I very much agree with you. I think for us, I mean, the Lego brick, it's a physical small product, and you can say traditionally we've had a very limited target group, right, of kids up to, let's say, 12, 14 years. And for us, really, it's all about staying relevant and expanding the relevance to adults and also to older kids and families. And I think for us, really, the challenge is really breaking away from our own self understanding and really learning from what is going on in the marketplace. And I think COVID has really taught us a lesson over the past year. That there's no doubt about that in terms of streamlining decision-making processes and so forth. So for me, really, it is about learning, as you say, Ozzy, and really executing and being fast at that.
Actually, I think you succeeded, Thomas, because I still like playing Lego at my age as well. So you found a new target group. Something I would like to add as well. I think agree with all being said, but too often also you hear the case that Agile HR is about positioning HR as an agile organization, which is, I think, one of the things that you should be doing. The other thing is that you should also see how all your work practices and policies and products and services you support your people with should also be agile in order to ensure that your whole workforce and company becomes more agile and not only focusing on what you're doing within HR yourself.
Okay, love the input. Just a little bit to add from my perspective. So if we think about Agile methodology, this is in perspective. When you look at a compare and contrast, historically, we looked at waterfall methodology. And what that means really is that when you're implementing a program or initiative, you're spending days, months, weeks, years, in many cases, to basically craft a program or initiative to be exactly perfect. And then you roll it out all at once. And then you're going to spend years and years on the next. So it comes down like a waterfall. So Agile methodology is kind of the new wave of thinking, the new wave of operating. So operating at the pace of today, and it's all based on incremental adjustments. So understanding that we change so much constantly that we're not in a situation in many cases where we can have the time to spend that much focus on one initiative, because the world's going to change and there's going to be different needs by the time you even finish that. So it's this thought process that you will take good enough or a small incremental improvement to get us closer to where we need to be in a certain area, and you go ahead and roll that out. And better is better than perfect if it's right now versus a year from now. And understanding that it allows us to continue to be nimble, and the faster we are and the better we are at making those incremental changes, then we can adapt more and more to our environment. So from the HR perspective, it's about helping us change the way that we do work, decentralizing decision-making, empowering and pushing knowledge and thought process down throughout the organization so everyone can have that kind of input and be empowered to make those small changes and move information both upwards and downwards through the organization so that it can act kind of like, the internet in a way, all these different things going on at the same time, and move in a mobile fashion, communicating through the different departments, through the different roles, so that it adapts to the needs of the business at that moment.
We have a couple of questions and I want to get some of them answered. The first one is, Can this panel speak to some of the metrics behind determining organizational agility?
It's a very good question. I think we haven't set up any specific targets on you can say agility as such. For us, it's ultimately measured in how well are we succeeding on our sales and our EBIT and our customer net promoter scores, our employee net promoter scores, and motivation satisfaction. So if we are able to adapt to what is, I mean, especially of the past year, what is coming at us, and we're able to meet and perhaps even go beyond what we had of targets in those areas already, that means that we are working agile. We are moving away from our comfort zone and trying to scramble and get things moving. So we don't have specific agility targets as such.
Maybe I build on that a little bit, Thomas. So in our case, we normally look at improvements in 3 areas. The first is people's and employee engagement and satisfaction. The second is customer engagement and satisfaction. And the third is really about what Beth was talking about. I hope Beth is okay, about speed. And I think, so in the first area, typical engagement surveys are normal. I'm more and more a believer that actually we shouldn't just measure aggregate employee engagement or health scores, but much more listen to stories, how the stories change within the organization. And I think Ben Zander, I think he's 85-year-old, the chief conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, once said, the only true measure for leadership is shiny eyes. So sparkles in people's eyes. And I think that is a good measure. On the second, customer satisfaction, so typical customer satisfaction scores or market reach and market growth scores. And then on the speed side, I think typically in the product development area, we measure velocity and story points and kind of measures that are closer to the epics and feature development that we have on the IT side. But we're also measuring things like time to market or time to volume. Time to market is normally the time it takes to develop a new product or a new service into one market, whereas time to volume is to offer the same service across multiple markets. And really, as I said at the beginning, a lot of the real challenges with Agile come when it is across multiple geographical dimensions, multiple functions, so that you really manage to create organizational learning at scale across a complex organization. So those would be some of my ideas.
Sure.
Look, and
That I actually, yeah, it sounds maybe becoming a bit boring, but I agree with you both were saying. Maybe one thing to add is that we also measure how soon issues are being found and how soon we can solve them. So we noticed, for instance, also with COVID-19, we're working more remote. We actually discovered that we were finding issues much sooner. First, people got scared thinking that we were making more issues, but the opposite was true. We were actually learning to discover them more early so that we could respond earlier to those issues and come up with new versions sooner. Which to me is a clear example of the agility we are trying to achieve as an organization. We don't have a specific metric either. We focus much more on the business metrics like NPS and all the others that are already been mentioned by Bethany and Thomas. So Bethany, if you have any other insights maybe we can learn from.
Sure. So I would say it's interesting. It's actually a really good question because agility by its nature is, kind of intangible and abstract. So the way I look at it is it's kind of like the same metrics that you have been using. Like for us, it is on-time delivery, time to market, those kind of things. But we approach it kind of from a cultural standpoint of we're taking these orders for things we've never made before, things that sometimes we're not sure we can make, and we're putting out their deadlines. And we're challenging the organization to figure it out and to make it work. So our measure is actually on-time delivery and how long it can move through the process to get there, because we are very nimble of an organization. So it's still the same metrics. It's just what you'll take on and how you will challenge the organization with the goals you set as far as time to market.
Let's talk about how we apply this in the workplace. Another question we got was, how can we offer more flexible work, in particular job sharing and top sharing at organizations around the world? While it started in North America 40 years ago, it's still very rare over here. I'm not sure where here is. I'm assuming the UK. I don't want to make too many assumptions, but how can we offer more flexible work, utilizing, having this methodology in the place of HR? It's not typically found, in my experience, and I'm sure with most of you as well. It's not a common practice in our space, in the space of HR. It's much more common in project management and software development and IT and other more complex groups. In ours, it doesn't really seem to have taken off, save for the few and far between, the exceptions. So how can we use it to solve some of the challenges that we face in the space of HR? And I guess, Bethany, I want to kick it to you first, since you're a practitioner of the methodologies and in HR for quite some time. I think you mentioned like 17 years or a really long number. So you've got some stuff to share on this topic, I think. And I think everybody would love to hear your input. And then certainly anybody else who wants to jump in.
For sure. Okay, so the way that I've used HR to implement that is really kind of as a brainstorming situation based on different challenges or problems that the organization comes up with. So basically, there's an opening or someone wants to leave, and it's all about having the conversation and saying, well, how can we solve this problem? So for example, we have really just a history of having people who are full-time, and we had someone resign yesterday who we found out wants to go to school. And I said, well, why don't we make him part-time? And, we've never done it before, but everyone's like, yeah, we like the person. So a lot of the time it's just, you take the annoyance of someone of, okay, this job isn't done right, or this person has this personal life situation. And you say, well, how can we sort through that issue to figure out a way to still get what you want, but adapt to whatever the challenge is? And I know that the idea of full-time versus part-time is really small, but you can do it in terms of actual role design too. So a lot of the time, every time someone will leave, I'll have the conversation about what is it that you want? What is it that you need in this role? Because what I found is a lot of the time people are just tied to what that job description is and have this mentality of, oh, I'm going to take whatever I can get in terms of whoever applies for a position. But to me, if you have the conversation on what are your gaps, what's your wish list, and then we kind of tweak that job description every time for what we're looking for and really put it out there, then we're going to have the right candidate. And we have those conversations and it ends up flowing a lot smoother. So for me, again, it's kind of backing up off of that standardized protocol of just kind of plug and play and getting to know your operators, getting to know what they need and having the conversations and say, let's see how we can be creative to support you in that area.
Can I build on that, Tara? Because we are 284 nice people on this call, and I love this conference. Enrique, big congratulations from here as well. But I want to be provocative because I must say I've listened to 10 panels so far, and I haven't really, I don't want to be mean, heard a lot of new stuff. Most of the things I've heard, frankly, we had in the 80s and the 90s. And I would like to suggest that actually I haven't seen Agile work truly in HR work truly in Agile. And we were on a conference last week, which was called Teal Around the World. I can tell you most of the newcomers on the block, they don't even have HR. All right, so people are setting their own salaries, they're setting their own kind of management routines, they have self-managed circles.
That's very agile.
That's very agile. So I want to launch this provocation out there, and I love HR, don't get me wrong, but I want to launch this provocation. I think HR has to advance, right? I'm often speaking with people like Dave Ulrich or John Ingham and so on about new things in HR, and then I talk to my HR colleagues, and most of them are still in that typical 80s, 90s style three-tier model. Business partners, then we have COEs, and then we have people services where we do transactional stuff. That is old school. right? We still have performance management systems which are unhappily outdated, right? We have so much research which tells us that the cascading of annual objectives, the typical feedback where I give like a teacher some feedback to the teams and tell them what they're bad at, so to speak, or the annual ratings and rankings do not work, right? We know all that, and still, I would suggest there's little change. And HR and Agile doesn't mean tribes and squads and,
No.
and kind of type of teams in Agile in HR, right? It means reviewing all the HR operating model practices, the 10 or so domains from rewards to talent and so on, and seeing how they can support an Agile delivery model in the way that Thomas and Luke and Beth are describing it. That's what we need to do in HR. And I'm really looking forward to some new ideas in that space, because we need it. We need you guys. And that's me as a business person, so to speak, reaching out to HR. So sorry, but I wanted to place this provocation because most of these panels, there wasn't really that much tension, and I want to bring some of that in.
Not sure if you will find the tension here. Sorry, Bethany.
Go
What do you
ahead.
guys think?
No, I believe you're preaching to the choir. Yes, and I do believe that in a lot of companies they're still practicing the 80s and the 90s, but there's also some. I mean, there are also a lot of changes for the positive. There are a lot of companies already acknowledging that performance management is how we did it in the 90s is not working nowadays. It's not agile enough, I would say, but not even also facilitating what our people would like and need. I think one bold move actually we made last year is that we eliminated all the HR business partners as a whole. So we only have HR directors per business line to ensure that the people side of things is still on the agenda. And we have one wide business pool available where the business or the HRD can pitch their work to, and then will get allocated to some resources or product owners to help them support you in that. So we're not doing, let's say, the standardized work where we are always sitting at the table in every meeting, in every agenda, and so on and so on, but really saying, okay, what's your problem? What's your need? And let us see how we can prioritize that on our backlog and see how we can support you with that. And so that's the business side of things. I think the other side, and that's where my heart lies even more. I mean, we're often forgetting about people. So 5 years when we started the transformation, and it's still feedback that's still on top of mind. Somebody told us that we were the policy machine gun. And I think that's not a good feedback you want as an HR department. But if you are able to really listen to your people and listen to what they want and they need and what they are struggling with, and put your efforts to that, not only will you increase your efforts, your image as an employer, but your people will also be happier, more productive, and also wanting to stay much longer with you in the organization. So the funny thing is that it took us like 20, 30 years to see that it actually makes sense to flip the model. But hopefully things will change for the better for the next years.
Yeah. So, let me give you a couple, other hiring examples of how we do agility. We were looking for a business development person for a long time. And then we had, an opening for a regional sales position. And we ended up finding someone who was going to be a really good BD person, but he was out of our budget. We couldn't afford him. And so we had this idea of, hey, this is a new role for us. And we think this guy's got so much capacity. He could do both jobs, and then we can use that budget and we can combine it, and let's just have him do both. And he's going to kind of report to two different people and we're going to figure it out. But he's all for it. And we're like, there's already so much overlap. We think this will work. Or another idea is we were, having an engineer who's interviewing for one area, and they're like, well, he's really not good here, but we think this part of the organization needs his skill sets. That organization doesn't have an opening. So we're like, well, is there anyone we could pull out from this side into this area, this department, who could help us? And then see if he could go over there. And so now we're going to have like a whole, cross-functional, multi-department interview process. And then we're going to brainstorm, and basically we'll end up reorganizing the jobs and redefining the jobs of the engineers so that they do different things. But we think this person's skill set is going to fill in some important gaps in our organization. We just have to mold the organization to fit to what they can bring. So it's like that kind of creative thought where you adapt to kind of what the world brings to you, and you figure out, how do we make this work with whatever's coming at the moment? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
I'm not really sure the meaning of their question. I think that yes, to some degree. So I'm not sure they didn't expand further on the question that they had, but I do believe that getting some information about, like, can you sort of scope and position and think about other people in different places, even if their skills don't directly align, like that's a part of a whole, repackaging. I think to Audie's point, like, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Like, everything we're talking about from an agile perspective is the same stuff that's been talked about for years and years and years. And frankly, it's common sense. When you thinking about a candidate and going, can I place them somewhere else? Like, that's just, to me, just so crazy that we have to have a conversation about some of the things that are a part of this methodology to begin with, but yet here we are. And we got an interesting question where you brought up something related to like performance management, talent management, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and then kick it around about this, which is, how do we adjust performance management and talent management in an agile environment? I thought you'd love this one.
I don't want to dominate the conversation. I'll let off on this. I'm sure on performance management, we all have a view.
It was mostly a joke. So actually, I'm going to kick it over to anybody else who wants to really answer the question, though, because I thought it was just so funny. It came up before I think you actually said that. And I thought it was just a really great question. Let's talk about it, though, because there's so many implications here. I'm of your mind that I think a lot of things need to be blown up altogether. And I think that's what Agile sort of does for us, right? It gives us the ability to get rid of metrics, get rid of traditional norms and processes, and think differently to create the outcomes we're solving for. That's really all it is when you think about it, when it comes down to the bare bones of it. So how do we create, because you still want that feedback loop. You still want to give some kind of like, back and forth with a person, whether it's formal or not. What does that look like in an agile environment?
Thomas, do you want to go first?
I think it's really a huge question. I think right now we're in the middle of changing out our entire HR platform and getting something that is much better and much more data driven and data informed and so forth. But what we are really struggling with, that is this notion of, okay, how much should we actually be data driven versus data informed, and how can we continue to keep the meaningful dialogue between a leader and an employee? And I think the direction that we are heading is really that of promoting the dialogue over whatever the data might show you. We need still to have the dialogue, and I would say I'm fortunate to be in a company where we value the ability to sit down people and actually talk and have those meaningful conversations. I must also say that not everybody are completely just like fish in the water in terms of having both difficult conversation and just small conversations as well. So for us, it is we are on a journey to mature in an area that should lie very close to us, about playfulness, about really listening to people and respecting individuals and so forth. But I must say, I mean, if I look around me and I look at all of my leadership colleagues, we still have a way to go on that, because we get it thrown over backwards with daily priorities, and then all of a sudden we forget the good intentions and we just get bogged down. And I completely love your idea and your thought, Audrey. I think you can say the ideal would be that we wouldn't have HR at all, because everybody would be doing HR work or doing what we would love that HR should be achieving, right? But as you say, that is where we want to go. But the question then is it only the small startup companies that can actually really do it, because they don't have any legacy work, they don't have any legacy systems, everybody is everything is new, they don't have, you can say, a strong corporate culture that sort of, if there's a nail sticking up from the floor, it gets hammered down, right? That doesn't really happen in, you can say, in startups. I think both a good thing at Lego, but also you can say a little bit of a downside is that we have a really strong culture, and that sort of creates a consensus about how we do things. And then if we have too many outliers, it's either I would say they adapt, and then we get the groupthink and back to consensus. It is my God, it is challenging on really breaking free of that. And I don't know if we just need to throw in a hand grenade into our management practices and then see what comes up. But I think
you, Thomas, because before we started talking, you made a reference to Humanocracy.
Yeah.
Right. Gary Hamels and Michele Zanini's book. And I think if people haven't read it, it's a really good read. And Thomas was recommending it. And one of the things that Gary and Michele and I think all of us agree is, in a humanocracy, the business of business is people. And we have to come back to build our organizations, design our work around what people need. And if you look at a traditional performance management system, it has 5 components, right? So there's the target setting, there's continuous feedback, there's the annual appraisals, there's learning and development, and there's performance pay, right? Those are the 5 components of a typical performance management system. And fact is, you can find a lot of research that most of these components don't work. Let me give you 3 examples. So we already talked about targets, and Bethany was talking about some more outcome-related targets or kind of no hard measures, right? And I think that's really important, and much faster cycles. The second thing on feedback, I really think we need to get kind of move from feedback to more strength-based feed forward. We need to look at kind of in team-based feedback, not only individual feedback. And we need to nurture those rebels, like Thomas is saying. Where are those people who have controversial ideas, and cherish them, because very often they feel a bit lost. Right? The other thing that we are doing is coaching skills, right? Nurture the coaching skills, peer coaching skills and team coaching skills. The truth is, nobody wants to talk about it, but many leadership teams are dysfunctional. Right, and you need to put those things on the table in a psychologically safe environment and deal with that, so that teams can kind of self-manage really. On appraisals, I'm with Thomas. I would blow it up. Right, I'm kind of refusing to rank and rate people. Right, it puts you back into that teacher role to tell other people what they're worth. I mean, just think about it. Do you have performance reviews with your wives and husbands at the end of the year? Do you sit them down at the kitchen table and say, well, I think you were 7 out of 10. Let's build a personal development plan for you. You just don't do that. And if you want an organization, do you do that, Tara? No, I hope not.
No, but it's kind of a great idea.
Well, I think there is a lot of, we know from family coaching that actually contracting, but not in terms of performance reviews, makes marriages a lot better, right? So putting these issues on the table is worthwhile, but in a safe atmosphere and not one person rating the other. And if we want adults to collectively own organizations, and that's what Agile is about, I think we need to be very careful with some of these metrics that we impose and then rank others on, right? And I think leadership development is another one. We need to make sure that these values that we want from an Agile philosophy, we use them in promotion, we use them in recruitment, and not only go by kind of who has control abilities or the most power. And again, on recruitment, there were some brilliant ideas last week, right? Some of these, rather than having the manager recruiting, they ask all the people who will be the future subordinates of a manager to actually recruit, right? And have lunch and dinners and so on with the people who are coming in to see whether they're truly appropriate, right, to do those things. In Semco, the original Maverick book, Ricardo Semler, if you remember, they had like open recruitment sessions with all of the team to review the CVs, etc. So lots of things that can be done which are not traditional, right? And I think it's really important And the learning aspect is really, really critical, right? And I think we need to also look at how we do learning. It should be something that comes from people that is self-motivating, not where we impose that learning. And sometimes I look at typical architectures of skills, and it looks more as if they were made for the person rating someone else again, as opposed to like a university, what is it called? Like the course catalog or something, where people can choose and they do stuff that they're really excited about. That is a different way of looking at learning and development and peer learning and coaching and teaching. Right? So there are lots of things, if we start, as Thomas says, to look at what can we do differently to really cherish the uniqueness of our people, right? An organization is only successful if every single person has the ability to develop, to grow, and to do something meaningful. When agency becomes activism, right? And I think that really forces us to go back to the basics and see how we can do things better.
Absolutely. Luke, give it to us. I know you're chomping at the bit. Let's hear it.
Now, I was actually reflecting that hearing Otti speak, he actually wants some HR people to really unlock the potential and unleash all the handcuffs we put on them for the last decade. So there's still a future for us, I would say. And I recognize all of us been saying. I mean, it's crazy when you think of it. We want to give more autonomy to teams. We want to give them more responsibility. We want to nurture more of the entrepreneurship within the organization. And then what we've been doing is, let's say you have a manager and say, this year I want you to focus on X, Y, and Z. And by the end of the year, we'll see if you will get there. We flipped our performance management, I think already for 4 years ago now, and we're still learning and struggling, as an agile organization should. But what we've changed is that we're not necessarily saying, as a manager, you say, this is what your team needs to do. No, we provide the strategic focus, give that to the teams, and say, okay, if this is a strategic focus and these are our objectives, how do we as a team going to achieve those for the next 3 months, 6 months, year, 2 year, and really give them autonomy. And we eliminated all the performance ratings. We eliminated the performance premiums, which went along with the performance ratings, because they didn't work. And I think even in financial services, it's even worse, because you have to balance your KPIs with your behavior. So some people ended up with like 10, 12 objectives a year. So how is anyone going to achieve or outperform their own objectives by the end of the year? There's always something that you don't foresee. Now look at COVID, nobody foresaw that coming to us. So it really should be more about future orientation feedback, continuous learning, short incremental feedback rather than taking a year. And I actually do like the point that also giving some feedback to my wife is also very can be very helpful. Although I wouldn't say I would wait until New Year's Eve to do so. So
that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Communication is vital. We have some other questions and I want to get them answered because we actually have a lot of them. And we have short time, only 20 minutes left, if you can believe it. So check it out. In a strongly established cultural environment, like what Thomas was talking about at Lego, what are some of the ways you found success in bringing your team over to the agile way of thinking? How do we convince people that this is the right approach for us? Anyone?
It's yeah. Oh, sorry, Thomas.
No, please go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, what worked quite well for us is that we started talking much more of the business language, so they understood us much better. So leaving all your HR BS at home.
Yes.
And all the formal talks, and talk the language that business understands, and then it's actually easy for them to understand what you're doing, and they're also easily adapting towards it because that's something that they feel comfortable with.
I love it. What else? What else do you have to add?
No, I think for us, really, I mean, getting into this, it is, I mean, we started with some small exercises where we had some of our VPs and some of the guys coming from our digital part of the business coming in and telling us and sharing a little bit about, so how does Agile actually work and so forth. But it was, you can say, the whole mindset of just the concept of minimum viable product, that we don't have to be perfect from the get-go, that we can accept that we only get 50% of where we want to go, and then we start learning and we do continuous improvement on it, or we just scrap it if it's completely nonsense. But this whole idea that it doesn't have to be perfect when we launch new things, I think that is, with our culture and also with many of our people, that is something mind-blowing. And the challenge that we have is actually back from our founder. Their slogan was "Only the best is good enough," and that sort of lives on. And it's sort of a little bit is a box that we need to fit in and try to break out of, right? But it starts in small. It starts getting the inspiration from some of the other teams that are a little bit more on the forefront in the business. And if you don't have any role models in the business, then it's really about getting out there and talking to peers or talking to other companies that are really on the forefront, just to get some ideas. And I think when we do it, people are so generous and open in sharing what are their thoughts and what's working and what's not working. So I think it's, if you have just a slight bit of energy into this, then just go out there and explore, and people, I think, would love to discuss and share what thoughts and experiences that they have.
And speak their language. Luke, you nailed it on the head. Talk to the business like you know business, because that is so vital to be taken seriously in the HR space. To Adi's point, like, stop being HR people. We're all people. Be a part of the business, right? You have to be able to understand and walk the talk and know what it is you're talking about beyond what your area of expertise is. I have one for Beth, and I want to throw it over to you because it's specifically around the legality of HR, and utilizing a more agile model, especially at larger companies. They're talking about specifically discrimination laws with recruitment, hiring, unlawful termination. Are there any actual barriers or limits, or is this perceived? What do you know?
Yeah, can I answer that and maybe also touch on some of the other things you've asked?
You definitely do anything you want.
Awesome.
Your show right now.
Okay, so you look at legality as, like, in HR, you look at it as doing paperwork, or any job. It's like doing the basics. It's the foundation. So you have to just understand the basic concepts from a legal perspective. So let's talk about discrimination from a hiring practices perspective. It's all about finding the best candidate for the job. So as long as you are looking at the best candidate for the job, everything else is going to be irrelevant. So it's, as long as you keep the business needs at the forefront and don't put any kind of extraneous factors or variables into it, then that's going to keep you safe. And one of the things that I've encountered a lot of the time is people look at, how close can I get to this line? But it's not about that. It's about what is right. What's the right thing to do? And what's the right approach? How do you want to treat people where you could be proud of telling anyone, this is how I handled that situation? And you're creating a culture that you can be proud of, that brings people there and they want to stay. Then legality is never even a thought. It's never a question. Give people honest, direct feedback from a place of caring and wanting to develop them. Even if you have to separate them, as long as they understand what the gaps are and the challenges, then they're going to take that and say, okay, they cared about me. They tried, it didn't work out, and I get it. They might be mad, but they're not going to go turn around and sue you. It's the same thing as doctors, right? The ones who get sued for malpractice are the ones who have bad bedside manner. As long as you care about people, as long as you treat them right with respect, that's going to be an aside. So, but I did want to touch on, like, the cultural and the performance management.
Do it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, because Adi, I have to challenge you. You're talking about this old business model of HR business partners and centers of excellence and all of that. And I have to tell you, I think the HR business partner model is really the leverage that HR can use to help us adapt to the needs of the business. Because an HR business partner is all about understanding what our partners need, what our operators need functioning in their world. My standpoint is any HR business partner needs to understand how to do all of the jobs in that business, what it looks like, and be able to speak their language. And then they partner with those leaders to help develop the individuals. So when we talk about performance management and what that looks like in the future, I don't have an answer yet. Like, I haven't figured it out 100%, but what I can tell you is what we focus on is the day-to-day feedback and helping our leaders be more effective leaders, where they're actually partnering with the people on their team to share with them day to day and have a mentality of how can I challenge this person to be better? How can I invest in their development? A lot of the time, what I've encountered is leaders are focused on, oh, I just need to get this job done. And they're focused too much on the work that has to be accomplished instead of the people who are accomplishing it. The best leaders are the ones who are looking at the organization in terms of who is good, who has potential, how can I develop them? How can I invest my time in them? And so for me, I try to work on a culture where we're comfortable giving feedback. We're doing it in a place where we are not saying you did this wrong, you're in trouble, but how can I help you improve? How can I say, this is my perspective and we're going to grow in this area and I'm going to be a partner with you along the way and create that culture all across the organization. So we're not just sitting down once a year and this is when we talk about, the 5 things you did last year that annoyed me and what was great, but we're doing it every day and it's just a conversation. So that's where we're headed. I don't have anything systematized yet because, it's a long go of things. It takes a while to develop people and change the mindset. But until we look at it from a principled perspective and look at it from the mindset of the partners that we support, we won't get there. But if we keep that approach, I believe we'll figure it out.
Can I challenge you back on this one? Because it's exciting.
Absolutely.
And I love you for what you said, and I think there's a lot of truth, but I want to take a little bit of a controversial stance on this, right? So I'm running around, I'm a COO, 8,000 people, 16 countries, and I'm saying my only job is to make coffee. I don't need a business partner to help me. That's old school. I'm not ruling anyone. I'm not taking any decisions, right? We are trying, I'm holding the space. I'm creating a self-managed organization where everybody has the potential to be their own CEO. And in that model, I need HR to be completely immersed into that space. And whatever expertise is required, I don't have time for some sort of interface through a business partner. I do some sort of COE that is sitting somewhere in the business. And I think you're absolutely right, though, on 2 things. One, it's going to take time to go to that model. We're not there yet. But I would invite everybody to have a look at Dave Ulrich's latest thinking and also John Ingham's work on meshed team structures for HR. It's very futuristic, but I think there's something in there. So I'm not saying we could go there now, but I think that's the direction. But I want to agree with you, Beth, on another thing, which is leadership, right? My experience is in an agile structure, leadership becomes a lot more difficult. And actually, the consciousness and maturity of an organization can never transcend the consciousness and maturity of its leadership. If we continue to measure ourselves in terms of going up that career ladder from VP to SVP to EVP, hierarchy will prevail, right? If we need to nurture our own ego by putting people down around us, well, self-management will not flourish, right? So I think leadership and developing servant leaders who really take a step back, like you described it there, who hold the space for others to develop, that is, I think, where we have to go to. And that requires a lot of work on those leaders. It's not easy to let go of that positional power and become more like an acupuncturist, right? Looking for the energy flows in an organization and trying to unstuck energy. And it requires some knowledge about complexity, right? How does, in a complex world, in a complex adaptive system, how does management actually look like, right? And I think in terms of, there's always a Mark Twain quote that comes to my mind. Mark Twain said, the 2 most important days in the life of a leader are the day the person is born and the day he or she finds out why. And I think tapping into that mission that we really stand for, if we take all that kind of those personas and the targets away, right? What are we really here to do? And this is also where people, final point for me, misunderstand purpose, right? So we hear a lot about purpose-driven organizations. And then if you look closely, mostly it's like glorified mission statement, right? Or people who have like beautiful poems, but then they start to plan against that. And I like Margaret Wheatley, who suggested that actually purpose is something different. Purpose is letting go of your desire and stepping back and saying, what does the situation, what does life, what does my organization need from me now, right? Letting go of your own plan and saying, what is it that I can serve in this context to make my customers, the ecosystem better? And I find that is very powerful. And some of this letting go, I think, is necessary. And the business partner role for me still is a little bit associated with that hierarchical power structure, and the leader is the man in charge, and therefore we partner with that person and then good things will happen. But as I said, I don't have a much better solution yet, and I want to be a bit provocative, so please allow me.
Yes, and if you don't mind, I'll respond to that, because I think, I think it's a great conversation. And just to completely level with you, I'm actually in an organization that has probably leaned a little too far on the agile side, right? So we have a bunch of people doing a lot of things in very much organized chaos. So my role as a business partner is I adapt to figure out whatever the organization needs. It's not going to be extra structure or strategy. It's figuring out what is holding people back. And a lot of that is by talking with people and listening to them. And so for us, what we've had to do is figure out, hey, every so often we actually need to slow down and get together and talk about what each other is doing. And we need to stop focusing in our own worlds and take some time and focus on what the organization really needs and stop trying to boil the ocean. And let us take a couple days, unify on these common goals that we have to achieve, and try to unite ourselves more in getting this accomplished and push it down through the organization. Because we are way too decentralized, because it's like this managed chaos. So to me, an HR business partner is someone who adapts to whatever the organization needs and facilitates that change. So for me, it's in a way needing more structure because we're very agile, but that's not going to be the case in any organization.
You're muted, Tara.
I want to keep this conversation going. As you could see, I was very eager to say that to you, even before unmuting myself. We could do this for hours and hours and hours, but unfortunately, we only have 6 minutes left. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Luke to tell us once again who he is, where you can find him, and ask him to impart some wisdom related to what he hopes you take away from this conversation with agility in the human resources space. And I'm going to ask all of you the same question. So it's the same for everybody. We're going to go round robin again. I'll go to Thomas, Adi, and then down to Beth again. And then we're going to wrap up. This will be recorded. So really quick, this will be recorded. Lots of people have asked if this is going to be available. I believe it is through the Hacking HR Lab. You can definitely find more information. I am certain Enrique will share it with everybody. So please look for that in your email, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, everywhere, because it's going to be lots of places. So you will be able to come back to it. All of the resources, write them down while I'm talking about it before you write down everybody who's going to introduce themselves. So take a moment. Go back through, find the books you want to remember, find the links you want to, or better, just connect with all these people and they can tell you. Luke, back to you. Tell us who you are, where people can find you, and the wisdom you want to impart on us as we go. And then we'll head to Thomas, Adi, and then Beth.
Sure. So I'm responsible for employee experience on the future of work within ABN AMRO. Active on LinkedIn, already with Oti and Thomas. Not necessarily with Bethany, but probably after the day, I really enjoyed the last conversation as well. So, and that's also my key takeaway. So I do agree with what Oti is saying, but also with what Bethany is saying. And the most important part is that we really understand our people, understand our business, understand their priorities. And if you are able to empathize with them, you will deliver results that are actually needed, and you actually are welcomed at the table. And I don't believe that's only necessary for the HR business partner. I believe that everybody should be a business partner. So we'll leave it at that.
I love it. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thomas, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
So, yeah, I'm Thomas. You can find me building bricks in meetings and everywhere else. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect. I work on HR process innovation with the Lego Group. I think you can say the key takeaway really is there's so much excitement and so much energy really on this topic, right? And as you say, Tara, I mean, we can go for hours on discussion this, but explore, connect, get out there, and I think everybody on the panel, I think everybody who's part of the listeners here, happy to connect and happy to exchange ideas and thoughts. And I think this is just a really nice opportunity to do so. So
thank you for joining us. There was a lot of jealousy and questions about if you get to play with your with Legos all day at work. So can you answer that for us? You do?
Yeah, we do.
Everybody, he has the best job in the world. I don't know, go apply at Lego. They seem pretty cool. Adi, tell us a little bit about you and where we can find you.
You can find me on LinkedIn with all the others, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much. I would like to make 2 requests to our audience. The first is connect to someone. You cannot really grow by yourself. So find someone, I think, from the audience or from us here on the panel, and enter into the dialogue. At the end of the day, change starts with ourselves, and it requires some courage. But someone wise said, you cannot think yourself into a new way of acting. You have to act yourself into a new way of thinking. And I think these days, more than ever, require us to take a stance on this. With the problems that we find in the world, with inclusion and diversity and all these issues, we need to start. We have to become the change. And I'm always saying, we are not leaders because we rule. We're leaders because we truly care. So my invitation to you, please do something wherever you can in your space. Let's make this world a little better, and listen to all the advice from the wonderful folks on this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you today. Bethany, tell us who you are. Give us your nugget of wisdom. Where can we find you?
Absolutely. So Bethany Tehran, you can find me on LinkedIn. And my nugget of wisdom is, just talk to people, listen to them, listen to the people you support. I think, these kind of debates are so important and so healthy. That's what helps us learn. That's what helps us improve. So, hopefully it's inspiration to go back and be like, hey, what's keeping you up at night? What's frustrating you? And how can we change to best be all we can be together?
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a really fast hour discussing agility in HR.